NYPD removes students from Columbia in handcuffs.
Now,
What's this about?
Police officers, some of them even in riot gear, removing some of those students in zip ties, and right outside, clashes between police and protesters turned violent with those heavy metal barriers being pushed into the air. And this is what the scene looked like inside a Butler library a little bit earlier. Students protesting in a standoff with school public safety officers. The school saying 2 of those officers were hurt. Outside, a large group of students gathered earlier, attempting to force their way into the library. Remember, the school was a site of those.
Can you imagine paying hundreds of thousands of dollars to go to this university just to do this? That's ridiculous. And it looks like things this year are just as peaceful as they were last year.
One protester had just shouted "Free Palestine" as they had been ushered out by the police. This comes after demonstrations flooded into the school's library earlier this afternoon. Columbia University posting a series of updates and statements, first saying that for the protesters who refused to leave, who refused to provide identification and disperse, they could face possible arrest. Well, several hours later, they called in the NYPD, and that is what you see behind me. There are barricades, there are special response teams who have been going in and out of the library that university officials say have been occupied by.
So last year, when this same thing happened at this same exact campus, the university, they secretly were supporting the students. They waited a couple of weeks before even bringing in the NYPD. They spent time trying to negotiate with the protesters who took over campuses at this place. But the thing I'm having trouble understanding is, why do these protests always turn out to be less than peaceful?
Protesters and police trying to use these barricades you'll see behind me to push people back, and then the protesters then pushing back and forth there. Earlier today, it was campus police security officers who have been trying to hold this building on lockdown, and the university said that 2 campus officers were injured as they say some pro-Palestinian protesters had tried to force their way into the library, Gotti. This all comes amid President Trump, the Trump administration's crackdown on what they call harassment of Jewish American students, even cutting hundreds of millions of dollars of funding to federal funding to Columbia University, trying to stem pro-Palestinian.
I don't know who goes to college here. How can you enroll in this place, which right now is built out like a TSA checkpoint, and not expect that as a member of the student body here, you will be expected to engage in some form of radical activism? Because if you don't, these same people are going to march into the library and target you.
Fox News alert, Arab Spring breakers are taking over Columbia again. Over 100 college jihadis stormed into the campus library and tore the place up.
Look at that.
After holding the library hostage, the radicals demanded Columbia let their people go. But the university had different plans. No one can leave unless you show ID.
Ooh.
The rioters weren't thrilled and tried to bum rush their way out.
ID. Is Columbia University using identification as a weapon to suppress people's feelings? That is just awful. How evil. Never mind that if you want to even get on campus, they've got ID checkpoints all over the place. It says they're trying to escape their own insurrection. But look at this. Look at the poor staff. You can tell they work there because they don't have a mask.
What's the worst that's gonna happen if you let people in, man? What's the worst that's gonna happen? What is the worst? You're gonna hurt people, man. You're gonna hurt people. So you're creating.
This is so crazy. And this costs $93,000 a year. I don't know if these protesters are even going to make this much money once they graduate, if they graduate. This is frightening. And if you're going to chant this, that's not peace, that's intimidation.
The students said that the protesters demanded the Ivy League school divest from Israel. The protesters reportedly rallying in support of Mahmoud Khalil, one of the accused ringleaders of the pro-Palestinian protests.
That's the guy who's being deported.
Well, more than 80 people were arrested. All were students, according to the NYPD. And ICE is monitoring the situation. If arrests were made, the suspects were fingerprinted to determine if they were citizens or not. Secretary of State Marco Rubio warns the State Department is reviewing the visa status of the suspects, saying, quote, pro-Hamas thugs are no longer welcome in our great nation.
Okay, we've got to talk about that because that's one of the things that these protesters are all upset about. But why should our country pay for people to go to a university and then intimidate others when they're there? That's like the opposite of America. Even if you agree with this fully, this thing isn't even happening in America. And the people you're protesting against and intimidating, those are not combatants on a battlefield 100 yards from where you are. No, you guys are all students at the exact same school. It's very bizarre behavior to me. I understand people want to get worked up. They want to support something. They feel very passionate about it. But just a couple of months ago, these people were eating lunch at a cafeteria, living down the hall from each other in dorms, and now they're enemies. But now they're going to bring in the deputy ICE director who does not play games. Let's see what they're going to do about deporting people.
That report from Chanley, obviously ICE is monitoring this situation, and it appears that there could be some students with foreign visas in this group. What might we see happen?
Well, look, ICE every day works with the men and women at the local level to make sure that we're keeping our communities safe. This is just one prime example. When you see protesters go into these campuses, when we're working with the visa holders as well as with the State Department, we want to make sure that everything is being done correctly. And as the State Department continues to monitor these issues, we'll stand beside them as these visas are revoked and we watch these students leave the United States because it is a privilege to be able to go to school here. It's not a right for these foreign students to be here.
Hey, Madison.
You know, and that's the other thing. If you go to another country, like my wife is Japanese, if I go to Japan, I would never go there in the first place if I had a problem with that country. No, and even if I did, which I don't, I certainly wouldn't go and stir up societal unrest against it. That wouldn't compute.
Shut us out. We're not going to stop. No matter what, we're not going to stop.
She sounds tough.
Pro-Hamas protesters are learning that they can't take over college campuses in the age of Trump and at least get away with it. Columbia University is forced now to call in the NYPD.
Yeah, you know they didn't want to do it.
After around 100 or so of these pro-Hamas freaks occupied Butler Library. They're already arresting these agitators who declared the library a, quote, liberated zone. Yeah, liberated from studying. So, again, you're at Columbia, one of the premier institutions, supposedly, for learning in the United States, and this is what you have to deal with, studying for that applied mathematics final exam. Great. Here to discuss is Victor Davis Hanson, senior fellow at the Hoover Institution. Victor, the video is quite something. This was after $400 million of federal aid for new research grants was paused by the Trump administration, Columbia scrambling to try to make nice
yeah, you're not going to get any research done here.
People had, but I guess they didn't get the memo on no masks going forward. It looks like a lot of them had masks.
No. I don't think they could stop it if they wanted to, Laura, and they don't want to. I think we know it's a tired, weary, predictable script. They break all of the rules that they said they wouldn't. They're violent, they disrupt classes, they shout anti-Semitic pro-terrorist things. And then we get a weak-kneed administrator, an assistant dean, associate provost comes out and says, this is intolerable, we don't accept this, we will not, and it's empty because they have no deterrence. The students know it. Now, why is that? I think it's because 75% of the faculty, the administrators, and the students really do agree with what they're doing.
That's the key takeaway from all of this, is that if the school's administrators and teachers support this and are embedding this into their students and then the students act it out, how could the university have a problem with that? The students are in class, they're getting this material, they're getting these viewpoints from their teachers, these radical viewpoints, and they're going forward with those viewpoints, doing this. How could the teachers not be proud? They're doing exactly what the teachers wish they were doing. And in fact, at some schools, like at the new school, you had teachers camping out with students in tents in a lobby. So in some places, the teachers are part of this.
I don't know, maybe not the violent act themselves, but the ideology, yes. And I don't think they want, this is terrible because they're in this fight with the Trump administration. And it's kind of like a rock, you pull it over, and underneath it, nobody knew what was going on. And they've got $30 to $40 billion the last 30 years they've taken from communist China and Middle East dictatorships they haven't reported. They have racially separated dorms, graduations, the admissions that they're using are violating the recent 2022 Supreme Court ruling.
You know, people keep talking about how all politicians are controlled by money. Well, if you've got schools that are taking mass grants from foreign governments that might not necessarily be friendly to America, and they're teaching the next generation of Americans. Every 4 years, a new American has gone through 4 years of education funded by grants from America's enemies. You gotta wonder, what effect does that have on people? Are we looking at it right now?
Because they've gouging the federal government at 40 to 50% surcharges on grants from HHS or Department of Energy.
No, it's a scam.
And I could go on, and that's all. Yeah, they're all going to come out. They're going to lose this, and then these type of performance art spectacles. It explains why only 36% of the general population has confidence in higher education. And they're in an echo chamber. They're oblivious to all this.
This is why so many people are just...
Yeah, how could you hire somebody that said they went to Columbia now and not think this was coming to your business? Because think about it. You're actually looking at a potential ticking time bomb if you bring somebody into your workforce and they associate with all of your other employees and just either turn them against each other or get everybody embittered against one another or keep bringing politics into a corporate environment where nobody really wants to feel uncomfortable. They just want to show up and go to work. But what do you think about this? Are these protests just going to get worse as the weather warms up? Have we just seen the beginning of another summer of doom for these universities, not just in New York, but all across the country? Let me know what you think. Thank you so much for watching. See you in the next video.